How do you measure something you can't see or touch or hold? I mean, really, how do you actually test a mind? Okay, let's dive right into that, because the answer is way more complex and, honestly, way more fascinating than you probably think.
You've definitely seen this before, right? The famous ink blot test. It's a classic in movies and TV shows. The scene goes, a psychologist shows you this, you say what you see, and then bam, they reveal all your deepest, darkest secrets. But what does this really tell a professional about you?
Well, here's the twist. On its own, an image like this, it probably tells a trained professional next to nothing. And that's because the real story of psychological testing is a million miles away from the fun little quizzes we take online. It's a serious science. So, let's get this straight. We need to separate the pop psychology from the real psychometrics. We are not talking about those "which type of pasta are you" quizzes. We're talking about incredibly rigorous, scientifically designed instruments.
Okay, so here's the official definition, and trust me, every single word here counts. Objective means the scoring isn't just based on someone's opinion or mood. Standardized means it's given the exact same way to every single person. And sample of behavior, that's the key. A test doesn't read your entire mind. It just takes a small snapshot of what you can do at one specific moment in time.
So what really elevates a bunch of questions into a legitimate scientific tool? Well, it's not magic. It's a really strict set of principles that every single real psychological test has to live up to.
And here they are, the 5 pillars. Think of them as a quality checklist. First, standardization. That means your testing experience is identical to mine. Then, objectivity, so the scorer's feelings don't influence the outcome. Test norms are crucial because they let us see how your score compares to a huge group of other people. Of course, it has to be reliable. If you take it today and then again next week, your results should be pretty much the same. And the big one, validity. Does the test actually measure what it says it's measuring? An IQ test has to measure intelligence, not just how good your vocabulary is.
Now you have to understand there's no single test for the mind. That'd be like a mechanic having only one tool in their toolbox. It just doesn't work. Psychologists have a whole catalog of specialized instruments, each one designed for a very specific job. And what a toolkit it is! You've got your IQ tests that look at cognitive abilities and personality tests to map out traits. Then there are neuropsychological tests to check how the brain is functioning, aptitude and interest tests to help with career choices, and of course, clinical tests that are essential for diagnosing specific conditions. Each one is like a different lens for looking at the human mind.
Let's zero in on personality tests for a second. They generally come in 2 main flavors. You've got your objective tests, like the famous MMPI. They give you clear choices, true or false, or maybe a rating scale. Super straightforward to score. And then you have the projective tests, like our old friend the Rorschach. They give you something vague, like an ink blot, and it's your open-ended, free-form answer that gets analyzed.
Okay, so where did all this even come from? Well, the history here is pretty wild. Modern psychological testing wasn't just born from quiet labs and scientific curiosity. It was forged in the fires of social reform and, believe it or not, the absolutely urgent needs of a world at war.
The idea of testing people goes way, way back. We're talking ancient China and their civil service exams. But the modern era really ignites in the early 1900s. You have Binet creating the first real intelligence test, then World War I completely changes the game with the need for group tests, and not long after, those famous personality tests start to pop up.
And these are 2 of the guys who started it all. On the left, that's Alfred Binet. His whole motivation was to find a way to identify kids who needed some extra help in school. For him, it was a tool for support, not just labeling. And on the right, you have James McKeen Cattell, the American psychologist who first coined the term mental test in a scientific paper. But the one event that really threw gas on the fire of the testing movement was World War I. All of a sudden, the U.S. Army had this gigantic problem. How on earth do you quickly and efficiently screen millions of recruits to figure out who's officer material, who has special skills, and who's suited for which job? And the solution they came up with was just brilliant. Psychologists developed 2 different tests. The Army Alpha was for recruits who could read and write English. But what about the huge number of guys who were illiterate or didn't speak the language? For them, they created the Army Beta, a genius, nonverbal test that used pictures and puzzles instead of words. This was the birth of mass large-scale group testing as we know it.
And here are some actual examples from that Army Alpha test. You can see what they were doing. Things like completing number series, figuring out analogies, unscrambling sentences. These were practical pencil and paper assessments of reasoning that could be given to hundreds of people at once.
So it's pretty clear these tests are powerful tools, right? They can literally shape people's lives, from school placements to job offers to medical diagnoses. And that brings us to what is, without a doubt, the most important part of this entire conversation, the ethical rules that keep them in check.
Rule number 1 is informed consent. To put it simply, you have a right to know what a test is for, what it measures, and how the results will be used before you even start. It's all about transparency and respecting you as a person. No secrets. Next up, professionals have to use the right tool for the right person. You can't just take a test that was designed for adults in one country and use it on children in another, unless it's been scientifically proven to be valid and reliable for that specific group. The science has to fit the person being tested.
And this one is absolutely critical. These tests are not do-it-yourself kits. The American Psychological Association is crystal clear. Only trained, qualified professionals should be administering these tests and, even more importantly, interpreting what the results actually mean.
So here's the bottom line. This ethical code isn't just a bunch of bureaucratic red tape. It is a set of non-negotiable guardrails. It's a code of fairness designed from the ground up to protect the rights and the dignity of every single person who sits down to take a psychological test.
When you boil it all down, this is the picture. Real psychological testing is built on two massive, unshakable pillars: rigorous, hard-nosed science and a strict, protective ethical code. The stuff we see in pop culture, it's often just a funhouse mirror reflection of the real thing, simplified and often misunderstood.
So yeah, we've created these incredible, powerful tools to measure and understand the mind. They can help people, they can guide careers, they can advance science in amazing ways. But that leaves us with one last really big question to think about. What happens when we start letting the measurements define us?